Next we have Mike Dennin. Mike is from Prospecta, who are our sponsors today. So again, thank you so much. And Mike's session is EAM and Master Data Management. Trusted Asset Management starts with Trusted Master Data. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Look, I want to actually just say exactly who I am and why I'm coming here this morning to actually have a bit of a chat. Master data is obviously something that's actually run through most of my actual career. I've done quite a few different things, including being DBA, but I did spend about 16 years at SAP, all up in a variety of enterprise and solution architecture roles. But before I actually start, what I want to do is actually really give an overview of, again, why this actually matters. And again, maybe you can put in the chat window exactly why it matters to you. There are a variety of reasons, but I've come across so many different customers that, essentially unplanned, outages of any description or unplanned failures, within that asset space cause horrendous problems. And again, some of the figures that I've got here, I just actually, total together a number of things. So billions of pounds are lost, annually to unplanned industrial downtime. And so that's globally. I've actually added everything together for you: oil and gas, utilities, manufacturing, rail and chemicals. So this is not a niche problem, but it's not confined to one sector either or a geography. So it's systemic and it's growing as the asset bases age and operating margins compress. So I'll let you read through that. I'm going to be providing obviously the details, and I've got some of the references to, some of the reports that I've actually got there. But I did actually think it was interesting, sort of the 72-hour average recovery time per outage lands, in a commercial argument. And I suppose what we need to look at is when the maintenance data is incomplete or out of sync with SAP, diagnosis can be, extremely slow. So what does that mean? I guess clean, governed, asset data or asset master data compresses that window. And so that's why we see the importance of something like MDO comes to the fore. What I did want to do is also look at a couple of key themes. One of the things that we've actually followed in the industry is covering these 5 topics that represent the most significant opportunities in enterprise asset management today. And for each one, I'm going to actually walk through, some of the examples, but also talk about, some of the customer, interactions that we've had, and also make it a little bit more real. I do have a live demo a little bit later, in the session. And look, the good thing is that I'm ever watchful of my little timer beside me, so I'm hopefully going to keep to time. Now, just with this slide, I've actually added some detail around MDO Fuse is the master data governance platform, but it's actually underpinned also by the fact that, Kai is there. So the Fuse master data governance platform, so that's going to keep all your functional locations, equipments, maintenance plans, tasks list, measurements, points, and making sure that that's correct, complete and governed before it even reaches SAP. Again, I'd like to pose the question, and you're most welcome to actually put something in the chat window. How many of you actually have gone through whole triage processes where you're actually looking for the specific data? So the other part to this that I've actually got listed here is Kai, and that's the conversational AI layer. So once your data is trusted, then Kai, within the MDO platform, can make it accessible and actionable. So technicians asking questions in natural language, analysts running instant diagnostics without actually writing a report, all important, and maintenance strategies that are generated from aggregated fleet performance data, say, for argument's sake. Again, I can actually walk through each one of them. I'll just actually hit them at a fairly high level to start with. But if we look at that AI-driven predictive maintenance, this is the all-important thing that we're talking about. It was so great to hear Guy before talk about how much artificial intelligence is bridging the gaps in so many parts of the software landscape. But again, we need to ensure that data is actually governed, because after all, there's a huge amount of it, not just traditional systems, but if you think of IoT sensor linkages, the equipment records, and without a correct classification, then that becomes really, really problematic. Kai surfaces anomalies in that data through a conversational interface, and you can guide the technicians in real time before the failure happens. There will be a pop quiz about what Kai actually stands for, but it is KAI, and it is in part of the MDO platform. But if you can tell me what it is before the end, I'll let you know what it actually stands for. If I look at asset lifecycle optimization, Fuse connects all of that cost history, the utilization and replacement schedules into that unified data model, which is, all important. Kai can answer questions like, which assets should we replace within the next 18 months, based on a life cycle cost, without a report request, which is all important. And then if we look at things like the actual mobile and field, workforce, Fuse ensures the work order instructions, task lists and part lists are correct in SAP. So Kai gives technicians a voice interface to log faults and retrieve standard operating procedures. And that's could be hands-free in the field, all importantly. And again, I suppose with every one of these points, I almost get to a more importantly statement, but data-driven decision-making, Fuse consolidates, your ERP, your CMMS, your IoT data, operational models. Again, Kai surfaces a lot of that data in plain language. And the good thing is that, with the platform, we're talking about no SQL, no specialist reporting tools needed for frontline queries, which again, from a business point of view, is all important. Wouldn't be worth anything unless we actually then didn't do the sustainability and compliance. Fuse tracks energy consumption, emissions per asset, supports audit-ready workflows, and Kai automates the compliance reporting and proactively alerts on regulatory deadlines. So Fuse is the actual platform. If I mention MDO Fuse, it will be a lot during this actual presentation. So I did want to actually also just tie it back to the fact that, within industry, we're following not only what we think is most appropriate, but again, what SAP is actually saying to the industry and what the likes of Gartner and Forrester are actually talking to the industry about. So if I just highlight a few things here. So again, from SAP, AI calculates failure probability curves and estimates remaining useful life on all of that data history and APM insights. And this is the product capability underpinning the MDO Fuse platform that I've been talking about. And again, Guy actually pointed this out very early in his presentation. So again, if we're talking about that unified digital thread, and that's SAP's term for a single governed view of every asset from acquisition to decommission, exactly what MDO delivers is the data foundation for, when you've got an S/4HANA EAM implementation. If I actually also pick out a couple of other, figures here, obviously the offline capable mobile, and we saw some of that within field services. Field service removes one of the most common barriers to field adoption. And again, MDO's clean master data ensures field teams will always see the accurate asset records. If we look at some of the other things that have actually been noticed here, Gartner also espouses the fact that 50% plus AI predictive maintenance, adoption by 2025. And that's only a little while ago. The great thing here is that obviously we're moving at pace. 20% APM within EAM prediction by 2027. So again, moving at pace within the actual solution landscape. Even Gartner's Magic Quadrant differentiation criteria, so that's on usability and things like scalability and industry specificity, align exactly with where MDO can also play a part. If we're looking at Forrester, then you're looking at things like the data governance wave and the agentic era. I'd love to see a straw poll of how many people have actually maybe moved past that particular term, the agentic era. We're actually talking about other things that the AI agents will do, but it's a whole new ball game as far as what it can achieve. So again, treating sustainability data as a core enterprise asset creates the direct mandate for all these multi-domain, MDM. And I suppose, again, with where we're going, if you were to say that you have, multiple disciplines as far as different ERPs within the landscape, then MDO also can cater for that. So every major analyst points to the same 5 priorities, and those are the same 5 priorities that we're looking at. So the market has converged. The question is, again, whether these themes are real for you or whether, again, your master data is ready to execute on, or whether you need to do some more work. I wanted to actually break it up into the 2 key areas that MDO, the solution actually covers. And this is when we talk about key challenges, within the master data or master asset data space. What we actually have is an individual 12 split into 2 groups. I've located operational on the left and again, analytical and data management on the right, and they are deeply connected, and we can't actually pull those apart, or shouldn't pull them apart, because every ungoverned operational input creates an analytical failure somewhere downstream. Now, on the operational side, the core tension is data acquisition, so capturing structured, complete data without showing frontline teams. Is going to be problematic. Automation gaps also mean that quality checks are applied inconsistently, maybe across SAP plant codes, for argument's sake. You're actually reliant on SMEs to actually make these incredible decisions when key experts maybe leave the organisation, and some of that logic and that rationale and that brain power that you did have is no longer there. And again, the big one here is unstructured data sits outside any governance rule. How do you actually place some sort of governance on that? So when you're actually looking at field versus system discrepancies, surface during maintenance, when it matters most, an EPC handover creates a data bottleneck at commissioning. So, again, we can pick out discrete parts within industry, but again, what we see is what you need to be doing is actually managing all of it. You cannot actually disentangle it. So if I actually look at things like the analytical challenges that are downstream, the analytical challenges are the downstream consequence. So there's no visibility into the current state of an asset, data accuracy, and maybe you've got uncontrolled transformation management happening during migrations or mergers and acquisitions. You've got duplicate records inflating, things like CapEx, but cross-system inconsistency blocking digital transformation, especially when we start talking about standards like ISO 14224 and the ISO 55000 remaining aspirational rather than being demonstrable. And you need to be able to codify the rules and automation and know data improvement is sustainable. So this is where we also see MDO addressing the 12 points. And hopefully when I go through some of these 12 points, you'll actually see a consistent theme. So a couple of other things that we've actually noticed even within our own customer base, and when dealing with different SAP customers, there are consistent results drawn from a number of live SAP EAM deployments, and the four headline metrics, I suppose, really are the 40% reduction in asset data migration effort directly compresses the program costs, since migration typically represents that 20 to 30% of total project spend. But if we actually look at things like the 60% improvement in onboarding speed, and that's enabled by things like AI and again the classification in Kai, throughput multiplies because stewards confirm rather than create from scratch, and so that's a great help there. So a 25% improvement in say project management compliance follows when there's equipment records being cleaned and classified and linked to the right task list. Again, I don't know whether this is a problem. I've come across in my own career many times in which those task lists are completely delinked and orphaned within the system, and that creates quite a number of issues. So the operational benefits that I want to actually point out, on the left, so down the bottom, translate those numbers into plant language. So clean asset hierarchies from day one, reduce mean time to repair through verified equipment, and also that's through verified equipment BOM linkages, governed intake from EPCs and field teams. So you want faster order execution. Ultimately, that's what it's about. And if we look at the program and strategic benefits of the right. The strategic benefits on the right speak to transformation leaders. I'll get that out eventually. 40% migration effort savings, and there's a full audit trail for the ISO 55000 compliance. So we've got scalability across the SAP S/4HANA and ECC and APM environments, and a sustained reduction in manual cleansing and rework. So this all becomes very, very important, and so that's why MDO, again, we position ourselves as being right within that that crucible to be able to help on all of those levels. So I'd want to actually break it into, again, a little bit more detail about, within the industry, there are the two sides of the coin, and this will come up many times. And again, I don't know whether it's actually spoken about within the companies that you're actually working within, but there should be a conversation around analytical MDM and also operational. So the two-mode architecture that we support is, interesting in that we actually cater for both. So, what do we mean by doing both? So the analytical MDM answers, how good is our asset data right now? But the operational MDM answers, how do we govern every change going forward? So on the left, the analytical MDM, runs under the principle of understanding, profile, improve, and MDO Explore continuously profiles and scores equipment masters. And you'll probably hear me say equipment masters many times. In fact, I've got some things in the demo environment that I want to show, but how does it all link together? And again, generating pre-migration readiness dashboards for S4HANA. A number of our customers are going through, upgrades or, preparing to go to, new platform. And of course, the most important part is also the business data cloud and the benchmarking completeness across the asset hierarchy. So we can actually do the remediation and then act on those findings. So AI, again, drives this quality matrix and applies the validation and enrichment. The output is governed, the intake across every channel. So real-time distribution in the SAP Equipment Master and demonstrable as ISO 55000 compliance. If we actually then just have a look more on the operational MDM, it runs like a 5-stage cycle. And again, this is this iterative process that you need to get it to a governed stage. You don't need to just find out where the problem is. You need to be able to do something with it. And again, if you want to approve routes through the record, through the configurable stewardship workflows with a full audit trail, the distribution, I'll get that word out as well, distribution publishes directly to the SAP Equipment Master in real time. So no batch job, no manual step. And this is where we've actually done a lot of work to actually ensure that we're using zero copy through the BDC platform. All importantly, you don't necessarily want to bring, a lot of data or master data across a network. You want to be able to do it in situ and then have it actually managed. Okay, so this is where I was talking a little bit more about the analytical intelligence layer. This is how it all comes together. What I do want to talk to you about is a little bit more about how we see the world and how the actual tool operates. So we're going to focus in on Explore, so the MDO Intelligence Steward, and sort of what does that actually do? And so the analytical intelligence layer, within the first, module of Fuse platform, now it's a native SAP BDC product built to surface the data quality issues without copying or moving data. Now we want to also run that directly on a federated data or maybe in the business data cloud with zero copy architecture. Again, really, really important. The configurable rule framework covers, 8 data quality dimensions. So there's completeness, there's accuracy. We go through the conformity, consistency, uniqueness, timeliness, validity, and integrity. And we can generate up to 700 insights per record across the master data domains. Now, the results surface in the Analytics Cloud dashboards and through SAP AI Joule. All importantly, you're just hearing from Guy about where Joule sits, and essentially allowing stewards to interrogate quality scores and natural language rather than navigating reports. And this, again, is all important. So for you, those of you who are on the business side of the tracks, this means quality is the signal and is always live. But for the technical minded in this particular session, there's no staging layer, no data movement and no latency between those system state and quality scores. If we actually explore the feeds of the Kai agent layer shown at the top of the architecture there, it's the request, enrich, steward, insight and help. Now, providing the insight signals that the rest of the platform acts on, and you can remediate and resolve and explore finds. Govern prevents it from reoccurring, and this is where the loop starts, with a clear current picture of what the data actually looks like. Breaking that down into clean and transform, so remediate is the transformation engine, and this is the module that takes the issues that Explore identifies and resolves them at scale. So its primary use case in S4HANA readiness, preparing records from, say, your ECC, going through a couple of customer interactions at the moment where we're talking about exactly this, or other legacy systems for migrations into S4HANA and the Business Data Cloud. Now, if we also look at the automated survivorship, and that logic handles the most labour-intensive part of the migration, when there are duplicates of conflicting records, Remediate determines the canonical version and merges that accordingly. So duplicate detection, all the matching, classification and merging all run automatically. And so a beautiful demo would be where I show you nothing. I actually show you the end state, and you don't necessarily go through this. But there are lots of AI components there that are actually acting with the rest of the rule set. So again, processing hundreds of thousands of records with full audit trail and lineage, which again is all important. This is the volume that manual cleansing programs can't match. And again, if any of you have been in a team where you do have to do that matching and do have to do the triage process, then it can be quite a difficult thing to look at. So this neatly leads me to the govern stage, which is great. This is the operational layer that closes that whole loop. And as we were just talking about, it explores and identifies existing problems, remediates and resolves them. But also, the key piece here is the govern ensures that every new record entering SAP is validated, approved or corrected before it actually lands. The module that makes the quality property of the process rather than a separate program. And again, that I can't stress too strongly. MDO actually ships with a pre-configured SAP certified accelerator for all master data domains. So again, when we're talking about things like equipment masters, functional locations, maintenance plans, materials, multi-object change requests, and the actual workflow that goes that's the core mechanism. So structured intake, validation against, the engineering and quality rules, but configurable multi-step approval routing, and that direct posting to SAP in a single auditable chain. Now, implementation time from start to live governance is measured pretty much in weeks, not months anymore. And again, the underpinning piece to this is the AI-driven governance, so that it extends before a form-based, workflow. Kai agents, monitor the transactional signals, order exceptions, purchase order patterns, I should actually say. And again, goods movements and things like that, and raise governance triggers when transactional behaviour suggests a master data issue. Now, for technical audiences, again, the governance layer is the active, event-driven, not passive and request only. For business people, the result is continuous, provable data quality without manual intervention, and an audit trail that satisfies that ISO 55000 and regulatory requirements from day one. So I did want to break this down into a few other little things. Why is EAM master data quality, determinant of the plant performance? And I suppose I just want to leave you, with a few figures on this particular front. 38% of the asset-intensive industries are migrating to cloud EAM, and the data quality is the number one blocker in every case study that seems to be out there at the moment. And again, happy to be argued with, and maybe it's not your experience, but it'd be keen to actually talk about that further. But moving data to a new platform does not actually clean it. And I don't know how many times I've actually spent in projects with different customers when we're doing that transformation, that unfortunately what bleeds into the new system is a lot of dirty master data, and obviously the reference data that goes with it. That also creates a high cost. So 5 to 8% of the annual revenue can be lost in unplanned downtime, again because of these asset-heavy sectors and poor master data at the primary driver. So when equipment records are incomplete and cannot be either classified, or the maintenance cannot be planned or executed reliably, then this becomes a real problem. Now, this is an operational problem with a direct line back to the quality. 87% of executives say that digital twin readiness also depends on trusted, structured asset master data. So making this a foundational requirement for any digital transformation program becomes all important. And again, this is what we actually drive within our master data projects. We look for that way to actually, again, make these foundational requirements and keep that iterative loop, and especially when we can use something like zero copy, then reduce the issue with actually connecting to systems and getting rid of that latency. What I'm going to do is actually take just a few more moments before I get into a couple of customer examples, and then we can have a look at the actual product itself. But But I think suffice to say that, again, if you're looking at, putting the building blocks in place, then you have to look at that asset hierarchy and you have to look at solid foundations. So being part of that solid foundation, I don't know whether you can even show a show of hands or type something in the actual chat window, but who has a lot to do with functional locations. And sort of, if we're talking about plants and the hierarchy within SAP EAM, then every equipment record, maintenance plan, and work order depends on them being correct. Now, incomplete or inconsistent, structures, and that will cascade through the system. Wrong plant hierarchy means wrong reporting, incorrect scheduling and incorrect maintenance execution. So it becomes really problematic, all around. The business case that we've actually got, the business case that is direct out of this, 60% of those digital twins, rely on serious and asset hierarchy data, so as their primary implementation barrier. So if that's incorrect, then unfortunately you're not going to have a good time in actually implementing that. I will get that word right as well. MDO Fuse now addresses that with a 3-step governance workflow. So when we were talking about in the previous slides, the requester, the reviewer, the approver, that ensures that every functional location is validated to the right people before it reaches SAP. Now we're going to have a quick look at the actual enabling standards within the product itself, and then we'll actually have a little bit of a chat about different customers and what they're actually doing with it. So I just want to actually highlight a couple of things around the 3-column structure that I've got here. Left column shows the standards and define what good asset data looks like. The middle shows how MDO actually executes against them, and the right shows the outcomes delivered. So again, I won't read through the exhaustive list, but I'll just highlight a few ones. If you really love ISO 14224, then this is your thing, and ISO 15926. But again, if we're looking at how governing assets are identified, described, and related, this is the way to do it. Quality and classification standards all sitting there. So whether you're using E-Class or UNSPSC, define the data quality and material coding. Outcome standards are all there. The middle column is MDO's direct response. So Kai data acquisition does all of that ingestion of data and it enriches at scale. So if you're looking at things like the rule validation, and it enforces standards aligned quality at point of entry, then also things like governance via multi-object change requests also provide the auditable change workflow that ISO 55000 requires. Again, if we just walk through the laundry list of things like real-time enrichment, automates the classification against relevant schemas. Standards mapping handles multiple taxonomy, crosswalk, for organisations operating cross jurisdictions or acquired entities. And the outcomes on the right: trusted data, audit readiness, lifecycle alignment, and operational efficiency. What does this actually look like? I just want to highlight a few things here. An example with a pump. I don't know whether anybody's really interested in different pumps. I have worked for lots of different companies that actually have pumps, but again, whether it's actually rail stock or rolling stock, sorry, I should say, whether it's out on a mining site, whether it's actually oil and gas, there are plenty of opportunities to use the standards that are actually within those industries. And again, this is what we aim to actually show. But again, if we're enforcing the standard to say what to collect, here's the appropriate standard, the ISO 14224, but how to name and structure, then we're maintaining that within the system and applying those good structures and good master data hygiene right throughout the system. Just want to show a little bit of actually what you get inside of the system. This is actually a Power BI dashboard, but again, just being able to highlight MDO in operation, not as a concept, but as a live quality scorecard, I should say, surfaced in Power BI. Now, the actual KPI cards set the picture here. If we just do a little bit of a walkthrough of this, the overall asset, data quality is 73%. You can see that there across 892,000 records and 48 rules. So at a glance, we're seeing that, again, against an 85% target. All of this has been done with an ISO 14224 benchmark. Specifically, it's at 62% against a 74% target. At a glance, again, we're seeing data being pushed at us, but the most important part to this is being able to do something with it automatically and actually have that, within the system and, give us what we need at the end. So the conformance table shows the breakdown by equipment classes, rotating pumps are the worst performer, but we get a good idea of what's going on. The right side bar explains what powers this, the pre-built rules for that particular ISO standard, related standards, and a continuous scoring engine, and running on live SAP data. One-click remediation via KI and MOCR, and the ability to publish to any BI tool via OData or REST. And again, this is the key piece, keeping it open and to open standards. So it makes the SAP equipment record the governed standards compliant object. So how does this all come together? I want to actually show just a little bit about the data readiness that we actually look at and migration for S4HANA. So if anybody's actually going through an upgrade at the moment, then, again, this information is for you. Definitely with, the way in which we're sort of, implementing, but also integrated with, the Business Data Cloud. The diagram here shows the data sources on the left. So a couple of things that I've highlighted. So SAP ECC and some S4 Live instances, some non-SAP ERP systems, and again, sensor data, unstructured documents. After all, this is becoming the key thing. If anybody had actually looked at some of the reports coming out of Gartner at the moment, you might have noticed that they actually do say context is king at the moment, and that's certainly what we need to be driving towards, and that's certainly what we're providing. So this MDO role, spans the full data lifecycle in 3 phases. So if we actually highlight a couple of here, profile the sources, establish the actual baseline, and do that quality measurement, and set the target for data. The target data state for S4. So during the migration, we want to do the cleansing, the harmonizing, and standardize records en route to S4HANA. So not in a separate pre-migration project, but as an integrated step in the transformation. So after the migration, you want the continuous stewardship, and that comes with KI-assisted workflows. And so the governance that ran during the project becomes operational model and post-go live. So all of these things come together. The 4 outcomes of this approach that are probably worth stating again is selective migration, only governed fit for purpose data moves, not the full legacy state. I have been involved in many projects in which everything moved, and again, the nightmare that it was to actually get it back into some sort of semblance of order. Phased cutover, then we delayed sync back to legacy is supported, but reducing big bang go live risks. Continuous governance, MDO is not decommissioned after the cutover, it becomes the ongoing supply mechanism, and AI augmented. So we've talked about this common thread, the AI augmentation. Okay, I do just want to actually now jump out very briefly. I'm going to show a little bit of product. I just need to stop sharing this and share my screen. So bear with me 1 minute. Okay, just a hello to say, does everybody still see my screen? Great.
Yes,
fantastic. Yep. Yeah, we do. Wonderful. Okay, I just want to actually jump in and show a little bit of, essentially what you get with the MDO platform. A couple of things to notice here. You might notice that I've got, the main actual dashboard, which is essentially my, welcome pad. I've got a couple of interesting things here. I've got my task list, but I've also got Ask Kai. And that question still will be open. I will actually ask, right at the end whether you know what KI stands for. And it might have actually been a subliminal message in this presentation, but again, you be the judge. Maybe I just want to ask a question. Maybe I want to ask it, how do I create an equipment master? So look, I'll just get that going, but I'll actually show you a couple of things that, KI is actually able to then have the chat history that we've actually got opened. It's just doing a little bit of a recce in my own demo environment, but here it's actually got a number of different requests that have been made. Just a simple chat history. You might notice, create spare parts. We can actually issue it the command to actually go and do that. What it's brought back is, interestingly enough, it said, okay, well, this is the list of steps. But we really don't want to do that. We want to get, Kai to actually do some more interesting things. But I might actually then, go with a new chat, and I'll just show you something that, we've got some pre-baked, raising a request, and I'll see some sample prompts. Now, the prompts that I've got here, again, just in natural language. So, if we're looking at things like, hi team, I need to create a new functional location and equipment record for a recently installed, flocculant dosing pump and the water treatment plant. And this can just, again, be, very, very conversational, and, we get that in there, and we can actually set that off. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't want to destroy the demo data that's already being used for another demo at this point in time. But again, this is where I was talking about a little bit about the fact that you've got the ability to use an actual, again, voice prompt, or, again, speak to it in a natural language, and it'll go ahead and, create that request. It will also obviously make sure that you get a list of errors, back if you need to do some sort of triage on that particular operation. Want to highlight a couple of other little things just around the place. If I actually look at the equipment master, I'll just move this out of the way. You might notice at a glance, this is the one view, just the 360-degree view. You can see there's an equipment master number, which is generated by system, but also there's the SAP equipment number. All importantly, if you're bringing in multiple equipment numbers and things that need to be rationalized, again, we're making sure that when you do that ingestion, that's actually handled. We've got a quick data quality matrix that's over here. You can see the accuracy is nothing, completeness is 100%, consistency is 100%, but I obviously think that there's something wrong with this particular record, and that's why I've actually gone to actually show this. One of the things I want to highlight is, obviously, with the equipment master, we've got things like attachments. So there's an operations manual. But more importantly, right down the bottom here, we have other things like the functional locations, the equipment masters, bills of material. You can see that the different things like assembly BOM for the motor controller unit, or maintenance items. And all importantly, things like measurement points. But these are all created at that point where we've actually brought the data across from SAP, and we've actually brought it into the MDO platform. So I definitely want to just highlight that for you. Before we go too much further, there's a couple of other nice little things that we have in our storehouse. Things like dashboards. If I actually look at, again, I've got a functional location here, nothing terribly exciting, but the functional location under maintenance, functional location submitted, a couple of things around shopping centre facilities. I've actually listed a couple that are actually in Australia, but health infrastructure maintenance, by the contract. But these are all able to be modified and put together by yourselves. Again, when we actually go and sort of do this, if we actually modify it, I'm not going to go through and do the entire dashboard again. But these are all just different widgets that you can locate onto the actual dashboard. Some other really nice things that I tend to like, again, maybe put hands up if you're actually an old enterprise architect or even a DBA. What we've got is the idea of creating, workflows, and plenty of that stuff around having a visual workflow, so we can create a new one. I'm just going to go into one and show you what's there. Now, that looks all very nice and dandy, but what we do want to see is, what does that process look like? Now, I'll just actually make that a little bigger. And hopefully, if everybody can just say whether they can see that on the screen, a nice little bit of BPMN sitting there. And as we go through the different reviewer processes or approve, you can see there's a different step. And in each one of those steps, there's a form. And again, this particular functionality is being run. So you can make these as complex as you like. Out of the box, there are plenty of workflows to actually be able to use. So whether you're creating projects, whether you're creating the actual equipment master, there are a range of things at your disposal. But I did just want to highlight that to start with. Now I'm just going to stop sharing my screen again. I'm going to go back to the slides. I will just check quickly with the chat window. Nothing. Okay, nothing for me in the chat window. Bear with me 1 minute. I'll just go back to my presentation. And just jump to the right slide. So everybody can see my screen. I'm hoping you can. I'm just going to go through a few case studies. One of the things that we obviously like to do is be able to ensure that our customers are getting the most out of the actual platform. A couple of customers that have gone and done that. Again, if I talked about Equinor, large oil and gas company in Norway, the engagement represents the S4HANA EAM transformation use case. Now, there are 3 interconnected challenges that were sort of blocking some of the go live. Some of the legacy data, ECC data, was not aligned to S4HANA. I do know from a personal experience that, again, the structural mismatches and incomplete attributes and missing classifications across the EAM object can cause all sorts of hassles. Second, there was a large volume of functional locations required bulk conversion to equipment records. So structural transformation is impossible to execute manually within that timeline. So, and third, there was no, there were governance processes in place, but again, some things had to, look again at the validation, the approval, the audit trails, the meaning of the problem, and that was compounding, during the migration itself. So with MDO, we were actually able to address, all of these issues. So we actually placed some data quality rules, and they were configured for the ECC cleanup and transformation. So before we get to that overall end system, we were able to then ensure that, that had been done. XFuse bulk processing handled. So XFuse is actually an add-in to Excel, but it allows you to then, populate that for upload into the MDO platform. So the functional location to equipment conversion at scale. So no manual intervention was required. And we could do delta syncs via SAP BTP. All importantly, if you're going to do some sort of automated extraction from ECC, keeping the data current throughout the migration without manual exports and multi-step approval. Also, workflows per object type ensure that all S4 data was governed from go live. So again, a really, really good story there on that front. If I actually look at BHP, there's quite a good story just around the agentic AI use case. Now, it's live today. 3 challenges defined the starting point. Now, BHP had a fragmented MDM landscape, Sphera for MRO, and custom SAP Fiori apps for the asset data. So again, we were looking at providing that bridge with the unified platform to govern or automate across domains. Now, field teams also submitted asset change requests as unstructured text and Excel files. Deeply embedded workflow that couldn't simply be replaced with form-based portal without disrupting all the sort of like frontline operations. But every request then required extensive manual triage before validation and posting into SAP. So slowly, costly and error prone, but again, this was something we were able to arrest. And if we look at things like the MDO with Kai, resolved 3 of these without disrupting the actual field. So Kai ingests the unstructured text and Excel requests directly, and then we were able to interpret that. And material masters and asset master records go from unstructured requests to SAP-ready data in real time. So again, this whole idea of really making sure that manual triage goes out the window. The 4 phases, outcomes are probably worth restating here. Just, real-time automation end-to-end, 0 field disruption and no retraining, required, days to minutes on resolution time, and AI-ready master data foundation now underpins that BHP process. Want to actually pick apart this a little bit further. One of the things that this actually bubbled up into, the slide actually steps through Kai workflow at BHP, 3 stages. And, from end to end, from an unstructured field request to an SAP-ready master data record. Stage 1 is obviously the request intake. Field team member submits a request and an unstructured text or an Excel file, the same format they have always used. Kai receives the submission, ingests that content, and then obviously classifies the request type and queues it as like a multi-object change request. So again, without any manual triage. Stage 2 is Kai's natural language. So the middle part there, interpretation, parses freeform text and attached files using its natural thought and free text interpretation capabilities. extracts the relevant SAP field values. And of course, the last bit there, stage 3, is the the multi-object change request to SAP. The structured record passes through that rules engine. But suffice to say that, again, this is all about providing that overall governance and the quick time to actually resolution. I am immensely aware that we're at about 44 minutes and just have a little bit of content to go, but would be really happy to stay for more questions if there are questions. So if that's okay, I'll just finish off some of the material that I do have. Dow also, again, the challenge and the outcome. So represents scale, a global material science leader. Oh, sorry. Okay, that must have just been an anomaly on the audio. But anyway, what they had was more than 770 plants, 3 challenges to find their starting point. So fragmented tooling, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about like Wind Shuttle for mass uploads or SAP MDG. I don't know whether anybody's come across MDG. I've actually been through different MDG projects before and had to implement it. But again, there was no unified platform to govern the asset and MRO data from end to end. So the complexity and the compliance complexity was always there. But again, MDO resolved each systematically. More than 700 business rules were configured in the platform. And again, converting administrator-held knowledge into automated governance logic, all important. And I can't stress that enough. So this is what MDO looks like at the enterprise scale with multi-jurisdiction complexity. So again, we are in the actual business of managing assets across multiple countries, multiple ERP instances, and again, a combination of SAP and non-SAP systems. So that neatly gets me to the end. Thank you very much for listening. I'm really happy to take questions, although I do know that I am actually now over time. So I'll actually, eagerly await.